That was fun. All right, you need to start over, Brooks, because apparently there was no audio for the last 2 minutes.
Okay. So here we go. Southern Draw is my my first company. Again, Robert Holt's company seems to have taken off in the last couple of years. It seems to be getting bigger and bigger in terms of hype and the amount of number of people who seem to be talking about it. Last year's show seemed to be a monster one for the company in terms of attendance, as well as just people just talking about it and things of that nature. Every time I walk by the booth, I didn't have the booth, Charlie did, but every time I walked by the booth, it was full. It was jumping, and they've announced that they're going to have 5 or 6 announcements before the show. They've already announced, although not necessarily all cigars, they've already announced Jacob's Ladder Brimstone and Ignite 2019, and it's something that I really find interesting. I like Robert Holt as a person. I really I really enjoy talking to him and smoking cigars with him, and I think that it's one of those companies that you look at and think to yourself, this is a good company and somebody who should go far.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what the next set of announcements are from them. The 2 announcements they've had so far regarding show product. One of them is 1 SKU. The other one is this Ignite series, which is not something I think that they really can sell that much of, largely because I think it's also limited. So it'll be curious to see if they're gonna have something that's gonna sort of, I guess, generate the excitement on a large scale level, particularly when you consider the fact that the trade show is about retailers who are buying cigars to sell cigars. It's not necessarily about a consumer who wants to get the latest and greatest limited edition. And then, sort of the other question with Southern Draw, and with a lot of companies their size, is how many SKUs can the portfolio really withstand? Because it's big, and it's a growing portfolio, and that becomes a problem. And I think a lot of companies that are at that size or even slightly larger than Southern Draw are starting to struggle with managing the amount of SKUs that they're trying to sell.
And you had the booth last year. I believe that you come back and told me how busy it was as well when you were covering it.
The booth was busy, but if you want to throw that image back up on the screen,
I do. Yes.
Let's hope the sound doesn't cut out. Oh, look at that. We still have sound. So, if you look at that booth, what you'll notice is that it's not that large. The booth is, it's a decent sized booth particularly for the company the size, but it's one of those things where if you've got a gigantic booth, you could have 20 people in it, and if you have a booth like that, where I guess there maybe is a little bit more than 20 people, but it's not like there's 100 people in that booth. There wasn't.
I don't think they could fit 100 people in that booth very easily.
They couldn't fit 20. So that is Southern Draw. And I certainly think that's a good nomination. I believe they were on this list last year, if I'm not mistaken.
They might have been, yeah.
All right. So next up, if you want to change over. There it goes. So next up is Drew Estate, and another company that probably could be on here every single year. So this is the 20th year of Acid, as the ad at the start of this video implied. And I think that it is going to be interesting to see Acid as a monster brand. It's certainly not the most popular brand on our website with our readers, but if you're in the retail business of selling cigars, Acid is a big seller. What's interesting here is that last year Drew Estate celebrated 2 anniversaries. They had the 50th anniversary of Hoya, the 10th anniversary of Liga Privada, which really wasn't the 10th anniversary, but that's for a different show, one that I've already done 4 or 5 times now. And in addition to that, they had all these tins. They had a brand new series of bundles. They had Her Esteli basically got relaunched. I sort of made the point that they were drowning themselves out with all these different things going on. And I'm curious to see if we see that again this year with Acid. I'm also curious to see, kind of what the feeling is. The one thing about the Drew Estate booth that I think is key is that it's probably the busiest booth at the trade show. It's certainly the one with the loudest music, and it seems to be the one that's kind of got the most, excitement around it. And if the Drew Estate booth is not doing well, then that means the trade show is not doing well. It's a very good barometer to get the sense of how people are feeling about the show. And so, Brooks, you had the Drew Estate booth last year, correct?
Indeed, I did. And you had mentioned the 10th anniversary, and there was absolutely no no overt indication in the booth itself that there was that it was celebrating anything like that. I mean, they never have really. They've never done anything other than a big signs or anything other than the huge whatever they had, which was a bridge the years before, and the water tower last year, and they've never really done a huge sign that says 10th anniversary, come here, but certainly you wouldn't have noticed it just walking in the booth at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's similar to Southern Draw. It's one of those booths that's companies that just has so much going on, and so it might be tough for them to isolate it. I wonder if at some point we see them go sort of the method that General uses, where they, or even Davidoff, where General will divide the booth up into sections based off the brand, and then rather Drew Estate will have all of the product on display. So they'll have, whether it's new or old, you'll be able to see basically everything that Drew Estate sells, whereas General basically will only show off new stuff. They sort of take the approach of, what Macanudo Cafe is, or what Liga Privada number 9 in a Toro size looks like. We don't really need to show that off to you. And I wonder if they take that approach, because General's approach is a lot easier to understand, and it's much easier to see kind of what General wants to be promoting at the show, versus somebody like Drew Estate, where it is easy to get lost.
And I imagine a lot easier to photograph as well. It's very easy to get overwhelmed when you go into the booth and just see all of the cigars just splayed out everywhere. And things do get lost. There's no doubt about that. There were times last year when I had to hey, what's the newest size? Where's it at? Because there's 15 different cigars up there. So yeah, I think it's a good one.
All right, you want to move on to your number 2?
All right, so my number 2 is barrel-aged Karl Malone from La Aurora.
Well, barrel-aged by Karl Malone, made by La Aurora.
Yes. This was actually announced last year at last year's show. Karl Malone was in attendance, and they have not actually shipped any cigars as of yet that we know of. It's very interesting to me because there are 2 other NBA stars who have actually also have cigars coming out at this year's show, Wilkins and Splitter. And it's interesting to me because Karl Malone seems to have a little more skin in the game, if you will. He is a cigar smoker through and through. He has a store, actually owns a store in Louisiana. Is that right?
Yeah, in Ruston, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt that he is invested in this idea of having this brand and helping it to succeed. Certainly, there's been a number of sports people in the past, sports personalities in the past that have come and gone with cigars. Ditka being my number 1 in terms of what I think is most interesting. But I think Karl Malone could very well be in it for the long haul in this regard.
Yeah, I mean, Karl Malone, for those of you that aren't familiar with not his basketball story, that we're not going to get into, but in terms of his sort of cigar progression, he's been working on this project for many years. I think I first saw him in a cigar context maybe 4 years ago at Pro Cigar. He was down as a guest of La Aurora. He and Guillermo really hit it off. He is not only has the cigar line, but he also is the U.S. distributor for the La Aurora rum that may or may not be here stateside at this point. And so he definitely has a lot more skin in the game, as you say. I think the other thing that's different about this one is that all of those other brands, to my knowledge, they've all been basically a branding exercise. So somebody else has owned the brand. Like in the case of Ditka, Davidoff owned the brand, and then they made the brand for Ditka, and they gave Ditka's money in exchange for using his name and having him promote the brand. From what I understand, Karl Malone owns that brand, and he is having it made by La Aurora and distributed by Miami Cigar Company. But that's a lot different. He's also been in the DR probably more than I have in the last 4 years, visiting La Aurora and really trying to learn cigars. I haven't smoked the cigar to my knowledge, so I can't speak to how good it is or isn't, but I think it is absolutely fair to say that this is a bit of a different project from the Ditkas or from the Ray Lewis, the Gary Sheffield, the Bernie Parent stuff that they all did with Rocky. What are some other ones that we've had over the years?
So many.
John Starks. Who else has had a cigar with Rocky? There was a third one, or there was a fourth one, I guess. I forget. All right.
But I find it interesting. I wonder if also the idea that they had announced this cigar last year, but never released it. Now they're back again. I wonder if that also will have any impact on the excitement or people buying it or whatever it is of that nature, retailers buying it, whatever it is of that nature. But I'm interested to see how it fleshes out.
Yeah, I mean, there's somebody in the comment section just said 1 year hasn't shipped any cigars. It's an interesting one. I think that it probably didn't help in a lot of ways because there was a big buzz last year at the trade show and then nothing shipped. And consumers were told again in I think October they put out a press release and they were like, we're shipping it, and they also didn't ship then. However, I will say that I'd rather them not ship the cigars if the cigars aren't ready, then you shouldn't ship them. And I think coming back to the trade show a second time, we'll say like, look, we're clearly spending some money here. We're not just playing around. They have their own booth, from what I understand, so they're not in the Miami booth. Interesting thing.
It's an impressive thing to see that Karl Malone is in there and he's there and they have their own booth. It's it puts out a certain aura. So, all right.
So my number 2, and these aren't really in any order. They're the top 5. My number 2 is Nat Sherman. I think that there is a couple of things as to why this is a particularly interesting company. So this is the first time in 3 years that Nat Sherman is releasing any new product. They have 2 new limited editions. That is the Timeless limited edition that is on your screen. The other one is the Apaca limited edition. This is, like I said, the first time they've had any new product in 3 years at anything. I guess they had like a single store release for Riverside cigars, I think, in between that time, but really there hasn't been anything new from Nat Sherman other than some rebranded Jeep lighters. So there's that, and that's always interesting to see a company. I think that they are probably the longest standing, nothing new, longer than Padron and Ashton, which would be kind of the 2 other companies that come to mind, and people that haven't really released new cigars over the last few years. The other thing is that they've had some negative press last year. There was big fallout regarding some comments that Altria made to the FDA regarding whether or not they think that cigars should be given a full exemption. Altria was against that. There was a lot of blowback. You can read that article that's on your screen right now. I thought that both the arguments that were being made against what Altria was saying weren't probably the best of arguments, and I certainly didn't see the blowback being as devastating as I think it's been. It was not a short-lived thing. It's gone on much longer than that. And in addition to that, they've also had some staff turnover. So you can see up there, in addition to the people that are in the headline, there were some reps that were replaced. And so I think that this is an interesting year to see, just sort of walking by the Nat Sherman booth, walking into the Nat Sherman booth, how are retailers reacting? Is it still sort of where it was a year ago or 2 years ago? And I think it's worth sort of paying attention. Altria's got plenty of money, so and to be quite frank, I don't really think they could care about how many cigars they sell. It's not going to affect their share price. They certainly want to make money, but I think that it will be curious to see if the premium cigar retailers at the brick and mortar level are ready to get behind Nat Sherman. I know everyone likes Michael Herklots, but it seemed like even people that liked Michael Herklots were struggling last year with that Altria letter.
Yes, it caused quite a stir, as I recall. And you covered that pretty well, Charlie, so I have nothing to add, except that Herklots is my my man crush and a great guy, and I want to congratulate him for 8 years, right?
Yeah, 8 years as of yesterday.
That's awesome. Congratulations, buddy.
Cool.
All right. Next up on my list, I wish I could dress like him.
You could.
I really couldn't.
I mean, it wouldn't look good, but you could.
Next up on my list, Lars Teton. Now, this is a very interesting situation for me. Lars was in the 90s was one of the pioneers of infused cigars, and really made a big push, but kind of disappeared recently. And you could still get his cigars in what, California?
No, in where he was based out of. So you could get him in like Western PA and upstate New York.
But
and when you say recently,
so not even close to California, really.
Yeah, when you say recently though, like over a decade, he's basically been.
Yeah. No. I mean, he's been gone for. I mean, he's been not on the national stage for quite a while. Well, Alec Bradley and he have formed a partnership and have now announced that they are releasing a whole bunch of cigars. Now, the interesting thing for this is, for me at least, is that they have announced that they're all going to be grandfathered blends for the FDA. So that's not going to be an issue for them. But one of the bigger issues is the pricing, for one of them at least. You can see here, Grass has two sizes, the Grass blend, has two sizes that between $45 and $50 a piece. That's a substantially large number for an infused cigar.
In fairness, we don't know if those cigars are infused because Alec Bradley has refused to answer questions about the blends.
Okay. That's a good point. It's a substantially large amount for any cigar. So there you go. But it's not just that. There's also packaging is also very interesting, as Charlie has pointed out to me numerous times. These are the bands that are going on the cigars themselves, and as you can see, they're
interesting,
avant-garde.
I mean, they're interesting.
They're definitely eye-catching. There's no doubt about that. So the question, not only how much are these cigars going to cost and are they going to be any good, but also, is the packaging going to be an advantage or a disadvantage when you're talking about selling these things? Retailers coming in and saying, hey, do I really want these things on my shelves? Do I really think these things will sell? It's an interesting thought when it comes to actually having these cigars purchased by retailers this year.
Yeah, I think the other question is everyone in the cigar industry. I mean, I was not around for the heyday of Lars Tiedeman's, and neither were you. But everyone in the cigar industry is aware of Lars. But how many consumers are actually aware? If you drop those cigars off in the JR Cigar Store in Whippany, which is one of the biggest stores in the country, how many hours are you going to be there before you find 15 people that know who Lars Tiedeman's is, and then are then willing to spend the money to buy a Lars Tiedeman's, let alone getting the conversion rate? Because I think the one of the problems is going to be is if that cigar is on a shelf and you walk over to a customer that has no clue who Lars Tiedeman's is, and maybe doesn't smoke infused cigars, or even if they do, and you're like, hey, this is a sort of new, not really new infused cigar brand from this guy called Lars Tiedeman's. It's interesting. And they're looking at that thing for $12, $13, let alone $45 or $50. I think that's going to be a tough sell to get them to go there. I'm certainly curious to try some of the cigars, particularly he's got one, the sweet and spicy infusion. That'll be kind of an interesting thing to see how that goes out. But there is also the question of has the cigar industry just completely passed him by? Alec Bradley's certainly making a big push. They're offering retailers pretty large incentives to carry these brands, which I think is a good idea. I think that's the right strategy for any new brand or for whatever we're going to call this. But I do wonder, because I think about the cigar stores that I go into with any sort of frequency, and I just can't imagine walking in and seeing that stuff on the shelf and then trying to get someone to pay $14 for it.
Yeah, I think that's probably a valid concern, and I do wonder if that's something that will become an issue. So we'll see, I guess.
A lot of coconut in my beer.
That's supposed to be coconut in the beer.
All right, let's move on.
All right, next up.
Next on my list is Cigar, who I think also was on this list last year, and I think I was the one responsible for nominating them. In fairness, it technically is Quality Importers and Cigar. So for those of you that don't know, last January, Cigar was purchased in the context by Quality Importers, who is a large accessory house, essentially. They own a variety of different brands or distribution rights, so Stinky Ashtrays, Paleo. They make a lot of humidors, a lot of the $100 humidors that you see, Cigar Caddy. They have a cigar div tool, and I'm going to stop trying to name them because we could be here all day. But anyway, they bought Cigar, far and away the biggest acquisition they've ever done, and arguably the biggest acquisition on cigar accessories ever. And this will be the first year where they're going to be in, so that was the Cigar booth last year, and so this is the first year where they will have a merged QI Cigar booth, which is going to be kind of an interesting thing. I think the other thing that I think is fair to say is that this merger has not gone entirely smoothly. We posted an article about them moving to Florida, which should be on your screen right now. So they moved the Cigar headquarters, and they also launched a new portal, an online portal for consumers and retailers to process any sort of warranty work for their Cigar products, because of course Cigar has a lifetime warranty. That generated a lot of comments, including a lot of emails. I think I got a couple dozen emails from people being like, hey, I went to the Cigar portal, I put my stuff in, I haven't heard back from them for 3 weeks. that was concerning. Zycar was like, look, we're having some issues with it. We're also having a lot of issues with getting the product to Florida so that we can actually do these warranty replacements and things like that. But they said they were working on it. I haven't really followed up with them to see if they fixed that, but that certainly was not what you would expect and not what consumers expect from Zycar. And then, so that's an interesting thing that I would say is like something to see if they've resolved that, see how retailers react to the trade show. Another interesting note is that they poached Les Mann from Colibri, who was the VP of sales or the director of sales, and then they also poached Jimmy Muto of Colibri, who was the chief designer. And so what's on the screen is our tactical lighter that launched a month or so ago. This is the first and I believe only design we've seen from Jimmy at Zycar. I don't know how much he has. I don't know how much he worked on this specific lighter, but I'm curious to see the sort of Jimmy designs from Zycar at the trade show, because I certainly loved, and I think I speak for all of Half Wheel staff here, like the Colibri designs over the last 4 or 5 years have been much, much better than Zycar in terms of the appearance. We can talk about functionality, but appearance-wise, it hasn't been close. I think Colibri's just ran away with sort of the sub $150 accessories. And so I'm curious to see what Jimmy does now at Zycar. And then the other interesting note is that Zycar put out a press release a couple weeks ago talking about something else. And in the middle of the press release, they were like, hey, we're going to be, or QI said, we're going to be distributing cigars. And they were like, we're not going to deny the rumors that say that we're trying to buy a cigar brand. I don't think that we will hear any announcements on them buying a cigar brand between now and the show, because I don't know how serious they actually are about like actively looking for a cigar brand. But what I can say is that they're certainly going to be distributing cigars apparently, and that's interesting because Zycar made the decision a few years ago to stop distributing cigars. They used to have a line called the Zycar HC series, and then they sold it to CI. And they got out of the business of selling cigars. And a lot of the Zycar reps that I know said that was a great move for them, because it meant that you could have a Zycar event at any time that you were having a regular cigar event. So they could, if you wanted to be a Zycar LaFleur event, they could do that. If they wanted to do a Zycar Romacraft event, they could do that. And so it just opened up the doors, as opposed to previously, if you were going to do a Zycar event, you were doing Zycar accessories and Zycar cigars. And so I'm curious to see what that looks like and how particularly the reps react to that, because I know the Zycar reps at the time really liked the decision to get out of selling cigars. And they also weren't, I think in most areas, were not doing that well selling cigars.
Yeah. Jimmy's a great guy, and his stuff looks fantastic. Just fantastic, as you said. I'm really interested to see what's going on with that this year. But the question is, who do you think that Quality Imports is going to buy? That's the big question.
Yeah, I don't think anyone, between now and the show, I don't think anyone.
Between now and the show.
Yeah, no.
They'll announce it at the show.
Yeah, no. I don't think they're. I mean, I haven't heard any real murmurs of them being actively serious about like approaching notable cigar companies of any size to try to acquire them. But maybe people are finally learning to keep their mouth shut. That would be a first,
That's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
All right, next up on the list, my next one. You got it?
Yep.
Is Jasum Crow. Now, this is interesting to me, extremely interesting to me, because of basically one reason, and that's Nugs. Basically, Nugs is a cigar that has not THC, the other thing.
CBD.
Mm-hmm. CBD in it, and it's definitely one of the first, if not the first, as a premium brand, premium cigar to actually include this. It has taken off by all accounts. People I've talked to say that it's just selling out just about everywhere. And I have multiple questions and interests, which is number one, are there going to be different sizes? Are there going to be different ideas behind what he's doing with this blend, with the idea of putting?
Well, there are 2 wrapper types. We've only seen one so far. Or have we seen both? No, sorry. They announced no. This is confusing. So they announced a Maduro and a Connecticut, but they ended up shipping a Maduro and a Habano, which is what I reviewed.
That's right.
So there still presumably is a Connecticut.
Or maybe not.
Well, there was a picture of a Connecticut at one point. Keep going.
But the interesting thing to me is, will they be different? Was he just going to add it to everything, or a whole bunch of different cigars? Or is it just going to be this one line and these few releases? Also, the idea that this is, I wonder if the FDA or local law enforcement will eventually shut this down.
They will. But for the record, Restage just said he's going to have a 100 milligram Maduro. So the current ones are, I believe, 20 milligrams. So he's going to 5 times the CBD.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Charlie is pretty emphatic that he thinks that it's not going to last very long before somebody tries to shut it down.
Long is a relative word.
It's interesting to me, the idea that how long will it take? Will it happen? Whatever of that nature. So also competitors, right? He's not the only one who could do this, and I'm interested to see if anybody else takes the idea and runs with it. Perhaps a bigger company that can really put it into a number of different cigars.
Yeah, I don't see a way in which, like, 10 years from now, this is still somehow, like, there's not a process where this product has to get removed, or any CBD cigar has to get removed or apply for a different approval process than the regular cigars, because the FDA has made it very clear they are going to regulate CBD. It's so new. They haven't really gotten all their ducks in a row. I do wonder at the show if we see a company advertising a CBD infusion device for cigars, because that has been long talked about. And I know for a company like Boveda, that is kind of if you had to say, like, what's Boveda going to do next in cigars, the answer is trying to find some way to take those Boveda packs and to have infusions. And for the longest time, we've thought, like, okay, maybe you get like a chocolate Boveda and it would infuse. You could take your, Padron 1945s and infuse them with chocolate, which obviously I think would make a lot of people cringe. But that has always been thought about as like a next generation product. I don't know how much work they've done at Boveda. That's just kind of people spitballing about what you could see. I know some of their competitors have certainly tried to work on those products. CBD changes the game because if you can get CBD into cigars through the osmosis process that Boveda would be using for something like that, or a Boveda competitor, that would be, you could have any cigar could have CBD. And it may or may not, it would need to be probably regulated at some point by FDA, but certainly not in the manner that we're seeing, or we're going to inevitably see with a product that comes shipped with CBD. So that will be curious. And I'm sure at some point in the next 12 months, we're going to see those infusion devices show up from either Boveda or Boveda's competitors, or just brand new companies that are in the CBD space.
Awesome. Nope.
No, I guess we're doing Dissonant next.
Okay. I guess so. It's mine. I'm next here. So my last one is Dissident. This was a brand that launched in 2013, and it's a smaller brand. It was basically launched by people, the owners walking around and handing out cigars at the show. And I smoked a cigar of theirs called Home, which I immensely enjoyed, and Charlie did as well, I believe. And it was extremely good, and given a 92, I think. But then it disappeared. The brand.
Look at that.
92. Hey, look at that, 92. The brand kind of disappeared off the market, and there was not much heard of it. Now,
because the brand went away.
Yeah. Benjamin Holt actually bought the brand and is now redoing the entire thing. And one of my questions about this are the blends going to be the same? Because I was very impressed with the blends that I tried. And one of my main questions are the blends going to be the same, especially Home, which I loved. We just published a story saying that that is not going to be the case.
Yeah, that was the story that was on the screen.
So basically, it's a completely different blend. So
it's a completely new company.
Yes, and that's you mentioned that. Is it a completely different company? But I've felt that I've always loved the idea of having these smaller companies succeed, and this was one of those that I was really rooting for when I heard about it, and when I tried the cigars. But I'm interested to see how Holt takes it. Where he takes it from here, and if the new cigars are going to be as good or even close to as good as the old ones.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to me that, like, if you were going to get a brand, like if you were going to start a new company, but you were going to take an existing brand or a brand that used to be around and bring it back, Dissident would not have been on the list of things that I would have thought would have been the brand to do so. It didn't have a ton of brand equity. Like, Dissident was always a very small company that you felt like, with a little bit more resources and a little bit more time, maybe could have, turned into something a lot bigger, because It was two people that knew about cigars. They worked in a cigar shop in Kansas, and they worked in a cigar shop that sold Davidoff White Label and Padron, and they smoked everything, and they knew what they were talking about in terms of on the retail side. They came up with some blends. Some of them were great. Home was a great cigar that never came out, but none of the products were grandfathered. It wasn't like it was in a ton of stores. None of the products were grandfathered, and none of the products were grandfathered. So if you're going to bring a brand back, like, you got to have something that's got, I would say, some appeal in terms of like a strategic advantage. And this one just doesn't seem like it because it's the owner is new, or is a different owner than the last time. It's going to be made by Black Label Trading Company in their factory in Nicaragua, which is not where the original Dissident cigars were being made. It's going to be, I think, distributed by Black Label, it seems like, is how they're heading in that direction. Like, that is a different approach. So like, this is an entirely new company. It's not like Dissident is back, I guess, but not really.
And like you said, it is interesting to me, the idea that they chose this specific brand that I'd be willing to bet that very, very few people on the Facebook page right now, for example, have even heard of, and even fewer still have even smoked anything from, since very few cigars ever made it out. But
there was Block.
Yeah, Block and
BA, was that the other one, or was Block BA? Was that the same thing?
I think Block BLOC. Block.
Yeah, Block. But then there was is there another blend called BA? I don't know.
We had 3 of them. We reviewed 3 of them.
All right. Well,
so
one of which never came out.
Fascinating to me, and I'm interested to see. I'm interested to smoke it and see. It obviously won't be the same, being a different blend, but I'm interested to see how the brand progresses.
Yeah, so we're not going to go to that. I figured out what happened. I don't think the Sindicato slides made it into our show.
Okay.
So my 4th brand on the list is Sindicato, which we don't have slides for. For those of you that don't know what Sindicato is, it launched 2012, and it was a brand that was started by a group of retailers, a few dozen retailers actually, and some of the largest, brick and mortar retailers in the country. And the idea was, I would say, beyond we're just gonna have a cigar company, was twofold. A was the idea that they could all get together, pool their money and their buying power together, and they could go to factories and get better pricing and be something beyond just if one of them had started their own cigar brand. And then the second idea was that they could then, with the leverage of the success or the presumed success of Sindicato, they could, don't do that too loud, Brooks, they could then use that to pressure manufacturers into giving them more things or more margin, more events. I don't know exactly.
Things.
Yeah,
more swag, more
whatever. I mean, for some of them, look, there was
more hats.
There was 30 of them. I mean, I'm sure some of them wanted hats, some of them wanted margin, some of them wanted swag, some of them wanted free lunch. I don't know. But there was certainly an idea that it was beyond just let's have a cigar brand, and there were some other, I think, underlying goals. When it launched at the 2012 trade show, if I'm remembering this correctly, it might have been 2013, but I'm pretty sure it was 2012. That was the talk of the trade show. I'm pretty sure it was 2012 because it was Orlando. And I mean, there were big companies, prominent companies, people that should not have been spending time worrying about Sindicato, that were I remember having 25-minute conversations with them, and there was talk about some companies potentially not shipping cigars to Sindicato retailers and not doing events with them. As it turns out, Sindicato has not done very well. It struggled in a lot of ways, but one of the key ones was that if you were not one of the owners of Sindicato, those stores that weren't owners basically just never ordered the cigar, because a lot of them didn't want to give money to their competitor down the road in one way or another. And, there's plenty of cigars in the market, and it wasn't like Sindicato was really bringing, if you weren't one of the members, they weren't really bringing anything new. It wasn't like they were the ones that brought Hirochi or Banya to the market. They weren't, the ones that brought 7x70s to the market. They were basically just, some more cigars. They had a cigar called Affinity, or still do, I guess, that was this is an alternative to Monte Cristo White, and it's priced more competitively. The problem is people that are buying Monte Cristo White, generally speaking, they just want to buy Monte Cristo White. And so Sindicato really hasn't ever gone anywhere, but it's still around. It just never got fulfilled to anywhere close to what people, I think even the most conservative estimates were about what that brand was going to do. The interesting thing now is that Jim Colucci, who is the president of Sindicato, is now also has a very similar title at Gurkha, and seems to be very involved at Gurkha. And he is now there, and Gurkha is now making cigars with a lot of the same factories that Sindicato is using. And the question becomes, why on earth would anyone want to buy Sindicato now? Particularly in a world in which they weren't doing it in 2013 and 14 and 15 and 16, 17 and 18. And I wonder if this is the last year that we see Sindicato. Your thoughts?
That is a very interesting question, but one that I think could have been asked last year or even the year before that. It's an interesting idea. As you call, I don't recall 2012 very well. My mind isn't what it used to be. But
you ate a lot of McDonald's.
I do recall. Don't eat much McDonald's, thank you. I do
spent like 3 hours in the Villiger booth.
I do recall that they people were concerned and surprised, and as you said, it seemed like that it was a really a shot out of the dark that brands were concerned about. So it turns out they didn't really have to be concerned about much of anything.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly remember writing, like, I struggled to see how they were going to get other retailers involved, but I don't think I thought it was going to be this much of a catastrophe. Is this what it's really turned into? I mean, and they've had some good cigars. They made a cigar with Cas Fernandez one year, a gigantic Perfecto that scored like 91 points from us. But they just can't sell the cigars.
All right.
Now we can go to the final one.
Final one.
It is the IPCPR itself. If you were here for the first show on Monday, you will note that I mentioned that there has been many rumors about Consumer Day at the trade show. That's not happening this year. Maybe happens for 2020, as well as a merger with CRA. Once again, maybe happening this year. Maybe happens for 2020. I don't think either one of those things are going to be announced. Certainly the CRA thing, it would be very surprising if that gets announced before the trade show. Consumer Day, there's a chance I would say that it gets announced at the show, but I would lean more towards probably not getting announced this month, maybe later this year. And so I don't really want to talk too much about those two things, but that is something to watch. Those would be monumental announcements, either one of them, and would certainly be the talk of whatever day of the show those two things happened, if either one of them does. I will say that I also wonder, this is the first year that we've had this sort of leadership at the IPCPR, and I'm curious to know if we're going to see any other changes besides those two things, because there are some issues with the show, and people talk about attendance and how attendance is down, and it's not like what it used to be, and blah, 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 blah. And what I will say is that there is no way that you can get someone to attend the show this year if they weren't going to attend it last year, the year before that. And the other problem is that there just aren't that many new cigar retailers, and the total amount of cigar retailers is probably in decline. It's certainly at best is stagnant. And so you're going to have to, if you're the IPCPR, find reasons to get these retailers to come to the show, and just continuing to do the same thing that you did last year, except bringing it back to the Venetian, is probably not a compelling enough reason. In addition to all of that, I'm very curious to see how much the TPE discussion plays a role. Villiger announced a couple weeks ago that they were not going to attend the IPCPR Convention and Trade Show, and instead they were going to direct all those resources to TPE. Maybe someone that's been to TPE for the last 3 or 4 years now, I can tell you that there is no way that they are directing all of those resources to TPE, because Villiger had a pretty big presence. If they took their same presence that they had at IPCPR to TPE and cut it, say, by 30%, they would be one of the biggest booths at TPE by a mile. TPE is a much, much smaller trade show, particularly in the cigar context, and it's really not the same trade show. However, I am curious to know if the TPE discussion and about people saying, there was comments in the last show about how much better TPE's portal was than IPCPR. There are people that say, they'd rather be there in January. They like the idea, or February. They like the idea that TPE is paying for part of the travel costs for retailers. All of these things, if they continue to be a part of the narrative on a day-to-day basis, is going to be a massive problem for the IPCPR. And I think it would be in the IPCPR's best interest to start doing a marketing campaign, not like a paid marketing one, but like I think that they need to start getting out that messaging in terms of like, this is why people show up to IPCPR. This is how big we are. This is how many premium retailers we have. Because the reality is TPE is a smaller trade show to begin with, a much smaller trade show. But when you remove all of the non-cigar components, TPE is a minuscule trade show compared to the IPCPR. You will write as many orders. I talked to some of these companies that went to TP last year for the first time, and they're like, oh, we wrote 25 orders, or we wrote 30 orders. for a lot of those same companies, if they were at 25 hours in the first hour and a half of IPCPR, it would be a disaster. It is so much smaller of a trade show, and yet it's getting so much of the discussion about how great it is. And I think the IPCPR could really benefit from, counter messaging that. Although, if history is any indication, they will do absolutely none of that because they just seemingly don't care.
Well, I think that it's going to become a bigger part of the conversation. I've had, as you have, I've had manufacturers that I've talked to during our IPCPR coverage that have said that exact thing. I'm going to put all my stuff into TPE this year. Not just Villiger. It's not smaller companies for sure, but it's certainly not just one. It's not just two. It's definitely more than that. So it's definitely something that they should be looking into, as you said.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. The IPCPR is not an organization that has, historically speaking, responded to much of anything. But, get to go see the guy from Harley Davidson talk about how to market to people. Be great. All right. So, anything else, Brooks?
No, how do you like the beer?
Beer's good. It's a little strong and a little bit sweet for this morning. I don't think that it's going to continue to age well, though.
No, that's why I'd opened it.
Yeah, I think you should have opened it like 2 years ago when it came out.
Meh.
I mean, how does it compare to when you first had it, though?
The coconut's a little bit less, more coffee, less coconut, but it's still quite good. I actually enjoy it quite a bit.
All right.
Although a little early for...
A little early for much of anything at this point. All right. So on that note, I think that we are going to get out of here unless of...
Do we have questions?
Not really. We got people making fun of my hair at this point, so... I think there were questions earlier, but I think we've kind of dealt with some of them. I don't know. It's tough with trying to manage everything at once.
Indeed.
All right. So hopefully next week is better. Hopefully there aren't YouTube issues or whatever audio issues as we continue to try to work through this. I do think that we should have... Let me see if it's still here. Yeah. So the live schedule for the next shows is up on the screen. We'll be back here next week at the same time for the top 5 cigars that Brooks and I want to smoke. So I guess the top 10 cigars, technically speaking, between the two of us. And then we'll be back again on the 19th for the top 5 accessories that we want to see. Hopefully there are like 10 accessories by that point, because accessory companies have not really announced much at this point.
We might have to cut that down. Top two is probably the answer. And then we'll be back again on June 21st for 20 questions for IPCPR. If you want to submit questions for that specific show, because that'll be like a let's get drunk and answer questions in a slightly intoxicated manner. You should do so. We'll put up the Facebook Live links to do so. If you're on YouTube, you should note that we really don't monitor those comments because it's too hard to monitor both streams. So generally speaking, on Facebook is where we will monitor the comments. One note is that we can't, YouTube or Facebook has some weird rule. You can't put up like an event about a Facebook Live until a week or within a week of the event. So you will start to see those populate for the upcoming shows. And then I do have... After that, no, you're good, Brooks. So on June 27th, we have the big Facebook Live show. Confirmed guests for that show include Matt Arcella from the owner of the Davidoff store in Las Vegas. We've got Skip Martin, Skip Martin of Romacraft Tobacco, Steve Saka of Dunbarton Tobacco, and Truss. I'm trying to go in order here. Fabian Ziegler from Drew Estate will be joining us as well. I think he's actually earlier than Skip and Steve. Dylan Austin from Davidoff will be on the show, and I feel like I'm missing somebody else. And then we have one other guest we have to confirm. Who am I leaving out of that show? But that is it's an interesting panel. A few less guests than last year. And then, as you can see on the screen, day one of the show, June 29th, we've got Juan Martinez of Hoyt, Nicaragua will be on. Patrick will be handling that interview. On June 30th, we do actually have a guest for that. It'll be Klaus-Peter Kellner, the son of Hanky Kellner, will be on for day 2. And day 3, we are in the process of confirming that guest. But hopefully by next week, we have
all of the guests lined up. And the June 27th, 29th, 30th, and July 1st shows will all be live from Las Vegas. If you are in Vegas and want to check it out, the June 27th show will be done from the Davidoff store on the Strip, the Davidoff Cigar Bar, so you're welcome to join us there. So I think that covers it all.
Yes.
All right, ready to get some lunch?
Yes.
All right, so until next week, I'm Charlie Minato.
I'm Brooks Whittington.
Have fun. You gotta turn it off. Yeah.
All right, hit the button.
Keep saluting.
I was going to try to do a peace sign. But...
You gotta hit stop.
Really?